Now I want to bring in this hour CNN political reporter Sarah Murray, also CNN's chief national security correspondent Jim Sciutto, who joins us by phone, senior political analyst David Gergen, who was an advisor to 4 presidents, both Democrat and Republican, and CNN military analyst Lieutenant General Mark Hertling. Good evening to all of you. Thank you so much for joining us. Sarah, I want to start with you to give us the news here. This breaking news that Donald Trump is making some more job offers. What can you tell us?
That's right. We have learned that Donald Trump has offered the position of National Security Advisor to retired General Michael Flynn. No word yet on whether Flynn has accepted that job. But look, Flynn was the leading candidate for this position for a while. He accompanied Donald Trump to his classified briefings early on. He's been a very close advisor throughout the campaign and throughout this transition process. So in many ways, it's not a surprise. But just because it's not a surprise doesn't mean it's not going to generate controversy. First of all, Flynn has tweeted plenty of inflammatory things that are sure to get increased scrutiny now that Donald Trump has indicated that he wants this man to be his national security advisor. But on top of that, Flynn has also faced scrutiny on a couple of different occasions for how he has handled classified information. Remember, that was sort of a major thing that Donald Trump used to hit Hillary Clinton on the campaign trail. And on top of that, Flynn's own company is engaged in lobbying, and this is at a time when Donald Trump is insisting he is going to drain the swamp and that he's not going to bring anyone near his administration that's engaged in lobbying in any way. Now, of course, it's easy enough for Flynn to cut ties with his company and to say, I'm going to be focused on the government from here on out, but just sort of gives you a dip into the pool of some of the things people are going to be talking about in the coming days as they look over Flynn's record.
And like Donald Trump, he's also had some controversial tweets as well, at least one specifically that he's had to apologize for. I want to turn to CNN's Jim Sciutto. Now, Jim, General Flynn is clearly a Trump loyalist, isn't he? I mean, you've been talking to people on the transition team. What are they saying about this?
Well, he has. He's been one of the loudest, most consistent, supportive voices for Donald Trump, and early on, and I've been told by people inside the transition that Donald Trump wants to reward those people. And when you look at that list, that includes Rudy Giuliani, it includes Jeff Sessions. These are names already under consideration for some of the biggest jobs, Attorney General, Secretary of State in the case of Giuliani, and here Mike Flynn getting a coveted role very close to the president as National Security Advisor. But just to follow on what Sarah was saying, first about tweets. When we say tweets, we're not talking about just a controversial thing here or there. He has made very public statements about the faith of Islam. He said that fear, earlier this year, he tweeted that fear of Muslims is rational. He tweeted later that the Islamic faith is sort of an encouragement or demand to Middle Eastern leaders that they admit that the Islamic faith is sick, in his words. So that raises questions about whether the concerning rhetoric that we heard during the Trump campaign, is something that will continue during his administration. Finally, just in terms of his background, when he was head of the Defense Intelligence Agency, he was forced out 2 years ago. Flynn himself and his supporters have said he was forced out because he was pushing for more honest talk about Islam. But I've spoken to people who were involved at the time that he was forced out, and they say that the reality was it was about his management style, that it was very not just forceful but sometimes dismissive. He ruffled a lot of feathers inside the DIA and in other intelligence agencies, enough so that he was forced out by senior intelligence leaders in the administration.
Yeah, the quote is that he had a contentious management style, Jim Sciutto. I want you to stand by because I want to bring in David Gergen. David, talk to me about, and to our audience, about the National Security Advisor. What role does he play among the president's advisors? How important is temperament here?
Temperament is important. The gold standard, especially among Republicans, is Brent Scowcroft, who served under George Bush Sr. as National Security Advisor. And the role then and generally has been seen as one of honest broker. You have heavyweights who are running the State Department, the Defense Department, head of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, indeed including the Treasury Department. The people who compose the national security advisors to the president, and then within the White House there's this coordinating group, and the national security advisor himself or herself is the person who pulls all of these other people together. When you have a meeting of the so-called principals, the national security, then that is these various cabinet officers, the national security advisor is the one who runs the meeting. He coordinates, he brings the agenda, he puts people through it. He normally has lunch with the Secretary of State about once a week, the Secretary of Defense once a week. He stays in close cooperation, and it is a very collaborative role. Brent Scowcroft rarely offered his own advice about what the president ought to do. He would, if asked, offer his own advice, but rather he brought together the views of the various secretaries, and that's why he was the honest broker. He'd present something to the president, say, here are the four people and what they've said, here are your options, and here where they come out.
I want to bring in General Hertling now. General Flynn stepped outside the traditional bounds of the military during the campaign. He has said some blistering things, as Sarah and Jim have reported, about Hillary Clinton, and he has made controversial remarks about Muslims, even retweeting something negative about Jews. Is he the right man for this job?
Yeah, I won't judge that, Don. Mike Flynn is a very energetic, passionate, intense military intelligence staff officer. That was his career. He served commanders providing intelligence and has done a very good job for JSOC and others during the War on Terror. Some of the things that he did during the campaign, especially during the Republican convention, were anathema to most military leaders. That's not something you do. You could certainly, as a civilian, after you retire, support anybody you want and provide information. But it generated quite a bit of angst among both the serving officer corps. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs at the time said that was inappropriate for that level, both on the Republican and the Democratic side. John Allen did the same thing for the Democrats and reminded serving officers that their loyalty was to the Constitution and whoever the president was. So yeah, it generated some significant challenges to the officer corps, and what retired generals do is of debate. Yeah. Mike tended to go a little bit to the extreme in his support of Donald Trump. I wouldn't have done that, but he did.
So you're a straight shooter, General, but what do you mean you won't judge that? What do you mean by that?
Well, you know, everybody's got to be judged by their own style. You know, he decided to link up with a candidate and provide unbelievably strong support. That was up to him to do. Some will debate, I would be one of them, that it kind of goes against the professional ethics to do that, but Mike did it. So, you know, that's what he wanted to do.
Jim Sciutto, back to you.
Yes, John.
Go ahead, David. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think the issue for him, as whether he'll be effective or not, is whether he's going to be a team player or whether his combative nature will bring on a lot of conflicts with others. I think it's the best national security advisors have been ones who've been very collaborative, very respectful of the cabinet officers, ask hard questions, but they are these honest brokers. Now, I don't know how that style will fit. You know, Rudy Giuliani, for example, if he were Secretary of State, he has a strong personality. Right. He has an explosive personality. You know, I could see those two styles coming in conflict. They could also work very closely together. General Flynn also does have the confidence of Donald Trump. That's important. And what we're seeing is a pattern of Trump, again, turning to a loyalist.
Yeah. Jim Sciutto, you want to say?
Yeah, just a couple things. One, in terms of talking about his record, so yes, he was forced out as head of the DIA, but keep in mind, going back further, he was General Stanley McChrystal's right-hand man, his intel officer during the heat of the battle against al-Qaeda and the Taliban in Afghanistan. So he has a decorated military past, widely known, even from those who criticize his leadership at the DIA, as a brilliant tactician, intelligence tactician. So he has a decorated background as well. I will say, though, that beyond his management style, the concern you hear also about positions, particularly, for instance, on a country like Russia. He, like Donald Trump, has expressed views that some see as too friendly, possibly, to Russia. And again, there's some disagreement over this, but we're just seeing a statement now, for instance, from Adam Schiff. He's the ranking member on the House Intelligence Committee, and he makes this point, saying that you need to be, in his view, skeptical of Russia's intentions now, and he's concerned that Michael Flynn is too forgiving of Vladimir Putin's leadership style and Russia's aggression in Eastern Europe, Syria, and elsewhere.
Let's talk more, Sarah Murray, about more news about the transition team here, because there's news tonight about Senator Jeff Sessions of Alabama as well. What can you tell us?
Well, that's right. We are learning that Senator Jeff Sessions is, as of this moment, the leading candidate to be Attorney General. Now, being the leading candidate could mean that that could still change. We know that Donald Trump is meeting with a lot of different people, but at this point, that is sort of where we were expecting the chips to fall for Senator Sessions. He's another one of these folks who's been very loyal since Donald Trump got in the race. He was an early supporter, and it was, multiple sources have told us that the job that Senator Sessions wanted was AG, and that Donald Trump wanted to reward him and his loyalty by giving him what he wanted. Now, this is a little bit of a tougher hill to climb because this is the kind of a posting that does require Senate confirmation. Now, that may be no problem, but that's one of the things that the Trump team is going to be looking at. But just to Jim's point, I mean, one other thing that we've sort of learned today about how Donald Trump's transition is shaping up is the fact that he's going to have this meeting over the weekend with Mitt Romney, someone who has been very critical of him. And one of the things that we're expecting them to discuss is the potential Secretary of State job. Now, that doesn't mean that Mitt Romney is a finalist or a contender even, or that he's going to be Donald Trump's top pick. It just means they're going to meet, and this is one of the things we expect them to discuss. But Mitt Romney's view of Russia is so far from where Donald Trump is and so far from where General Flynn is. Remember, when he was running for president, he called Russia America's major geopolitical foe. So this sort of gives you a sense of how all of these interesting players are converging on Donald Trump's transition and how he really does want to have these different conversations, want to have these different meetings before he puts all of his chips on the table about who he actually wants in his cabinet.
Sarah Murray, Jim Sciutto, General Hertling, thank you so much. David Gergen, please stay with me. Straight ahead, much more of our breaking news. President-elect Trump offers